Hey, hey, what's up, YouTube? I'm back, man. I'm back. It's been a minute. It's been a freaking minute. Actually, it's been about the same amount of time. Usually, I publish like a month between videos. We're trying to get monetized out here, I guess. We're jumping in, okay? We're doing critical theory. We're doing the thing that I do, apparently. We're going over movies. Also, new mic. New mic. You guys like it? We're talking today about a big fish. I'm sure you saw the title. Talk about Star Wars and some terrorism. Ooh, terrorism. That's fun. It's not fun. Terrorism's serious. Before, you know me, I was going after like small little fish. Last video I was talking about what, Exo Kitty, talking about Love and Taipei, these Asian rom-coms. That's cool and all, but I want a big fish. And I set my sight on Star Wars. It's a big part of this conversation now. I've been seeing a lot of this discourse about Star Wars, talking about how it's anti-imperial. In fact, it comes from the man himself. He says it himself, George Lucas, creator of Star Wars, if you don't know that.
He did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda. When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
This is a pretty common piece of discourse. I remember I'm pretty sure it was middle school or high school. I remember it was like in the library, something like that, a foggy memory, talking about Star Wars, and my friend told me, he was like, Star Wars, Luke is really a terrorist, if you think about it. And I was like, huh? What do you mean Luke is really a terrorist?
This dude quite literally played a galactic terrorist who blew up a moon-sized city full of Imperial encounters and administrative assistants. Clearly, the Empire should condemn such action and should be supported in no uncertain terms to do everything in their power to make sure this doesn't happen again.
I noticed this discourse start during like pro-Israel rallies. There was these pretty funny videos by Walter Masterson. He comes in wearing a stormtrooper helmet. He's saying, the Empire was right. We got these crazy radical terrorists, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, the rebels, and everyone at the interview is like, oh, what the heck are you trying to say, man? What are you trying to say, dude? I like Walter. He's cool. Makes some pretty funny videos, makes some good points. But you know me, guys, like, when I see a multi-billion dollar, like $70 billion I have written here, when I see that, I'm suspicious, right? I can't help but come back to my boy, Mark Fisher. I can't help but return to capitalist realism. I can't help but think, George Lucas says that this is a critique of capitalism, or of imperialism, which is a form of capitalism. We'll get into that later, but that was a term coined by Lenin, Vlad Lenin. You guys might have heard of him, but we'll get to that. I mean, talk about Luke. He's from the desert. He has a mystical mission from God or the Force or his uncle, a revolutionary. The only difference is he's a white dude. Give him a beard and maybe an AK-47. Osama bin Skywalker. Luke Ibn Skywalker. I think people will be very mad nowadays if we dropped. If we dropped Arab Star Wars. Another thing that informed this video when I was researching was this interview that Lucas does with, I think it's J.J. Abrams, right? And they're talking about, sci-fi and like what sci-fi really is, man. And, the other director dude brings up a point. He's like, hey, man, nowadays you'd call the guys in Star Wars, we'd probably call them terrorists. They're going up against a big, strong army. And then George Lucas comes in, all proud of himself. He's like, I'm an anthropologist.
I come out of anthropology.
And it's really the Viet Cong. That was the conversation happening at our time. The Vietnam War. I didn't know that much about Vietnam before this. I only knew about it from, shocker, movies. American movies about Vietnam. Never Vietnamese movies about Vietnam. Weirdly. I knew generally as a leftist, like, probably a bad war. Everyone agrees on that. Everyone's like, yeah, Vietnam was shit. I don't know why we sent people there. It was really dumb. And we made all these movies about it. George Lucas mapped the rebels onto these Viet Cong, who are communists. The Vietnam War was really a war of capitalism versus communism, stopping the spread of communism. They talk about something called the domino theory back then, where if one country fell, quote unquote, fell to communism, then other Asian countries would follow. And, these simple-minded natives will latch on to the communism and Russian hegemony will spread. I mean, literally propaganda. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? A domino effect? A big part of it is, like, these countries just want sovereignty. Like, these countries just want to be their own countries. They don't want to be colonized again. And I didn't know about the full history of Vietnam. These guys were Chads back in the, like, all through the 20th century, really. The long French colonization of Vietnam was wild, and the legend of this dude, Uncle Ho Chi Minh, they ran through 3 of the strongest imperial powers: France, Japan, and then lastly the US. You know, they kicked our asses.
Scoreboard! Scoreboard! Oh, what happened to your friend? Hey, I know that guy. I kill him. He cried like a bitch.
That's going even further. We're gonna get into Vietnam later, a little bit more about that. But my thing is, so this is a critique, right? This is a critique of imperialism, of American imperialism. That is what Lucas says. It's Americans. But we all know the empire is Nazis, right? Like, they're mapped as Nazis. Stormtroopers, references to lightning, storm, SS, you know, all this crap, dressing in black, having weird little beards and stuff like that. So obvious they're mapped onto Nazis, which I think makes us feel as Americans like, oh, I mean, these guys are obviously the bad guys. And there's no question about if they're good or they're bad. Because, like, in episode 1, they're like, blow up Leia's home planet. No doubt who's the bad guy there. But what's confusing to me is, what is the critique? Like, we're saying this is anti-imperialist. They're called the Imperial Army. They are the bad guys of this. Is this a critique of imperialism? Like, we all know deep down that imperialism is bad. Us Americans, and I'm talking from the American perspective here, I'm American. They're the Viet Cong? Are they Mujahideen? Are they fighting the Nazis? Are they the Americans in the Revolutionary War? It's all sort of wishy-washy. And that would be fine if Lucas didn't literally say, these are the Viet Cong.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Are we appropriating? Hey, cancel police here. Are we appropriating revolutionary culture? Yes. yes, we are. It makes us feel cool, man. Who wants to feel like the bad guy? Who wants to feel like the big bad empire? Hey, man, you calling me because I'm a white guy? You think I'm a colonist because I'm a white guy? Come on, man. We've been colonized too. There are white slaves. Whatever. I mean, whatever. Like, this is a huge conversation right now. You know, white guilt. Who's the colonized? Who's the colonizer? This country has it better. This country has a responsibility to fix itself. This country was destroyed by imperialism. This country was colonized. This country was not colonized.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
And it's all very confusing. And Star Wars doesn't particularly help that confusion. In fact, I think it profits. Makes a $70 billion profit off of it, off of this lack of specificity and this appropriation of revolutionary ideals. And now the burden of proof is on me to prove it. Because we got a lot of Star Wars fans. And don't get me wrong, man. Hey, man, I like fucking Star Wars. I like the Star Wars movies. I like to go beep boop, the little droids, man. It's cool. Jar Jar Binks. And my other thing was, like, watching those Walter Masterson videos is like, why don't people get it? If it is so clear, if Lucas is being so clear about anti-American imperialism, anti-democratic stuff, why don't people get it? Why do we elect some guy like Trump, who's obviously that? Why don't people get it? It's such a popular movie. Who hasn't watched Star Wars? The director said it. You know, he doesn't have an obligation to be lecturing us all about, you know, American imperialism and stuff like that. But he said it. He said they're the Viet Cong. So why don't people get it? That's my only question. I tend towards capitalist realism. It's got to be something along those lines. But yeah, let's get into it. That's the intro, I guess. So I'm a film person, ostensibly. I went to this film school. I studied acting. I did all this stuff. I've taken script writing classes and all this crap.
And I'm an NYU film school graduate, sucker.
What have I gotten from it? Not much. It's not the easiest industry out here in sunny Los Angeles, but I learned how to write scripts, and that structure is something that's really important to people. People love the structure. 5-act structures, things like that. You run through all these different books, Save the Cat, Sid Fields, how to write a screenplay, all this stuff, and there's like tried and proven sort of mathematical ways to write a script. Even a guy like Aristotle will use, old man Aristotle, writes in the Poetics that there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's a denouement. There's a crisis climax. There's a rising action, all this stuff. And another big one is Joseph Campbell, this guy who wrote about the monomyth. I'm not going to get too into monomyth or Hero of a Thousand Faces. I didn't really read it. I just want to talk about my personal experience with it. I've written scripts in this way of like the 8 steps in the cycle, and in every story, this guy starts at the start and he goes back to the same place he was before, and he always talks to an old man, he always runs into a bad thing, and then when he's down here, it's like the hardest part, the darkest night or whatever, and then in Act 5, he finally meets the crisis climax, all this sort of stuff. And I'd say Joseph Campbell is a big contributor to that. And I think what gives him a lot of credence is that he worked with George Lucas. George Lucas was like, we got to make a myth for American culture. Americans don't have like their own myth.
Well, when I did Star Wars, I consciously set about to recreate myths and the classic mythological motifs, and I wanted to use those motifs to deal with issues that existed today.
There's these old myths back in antiquity, archetypal things that people always cling to. Joseph Campbell used people like Jung, who said that there's like these huge archetypes, and that there's this like, big Mother Earth, there's a shadow that we all have, blah, 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 all this stuff. And there are these certain psychological things that you have to deal with that will be universal for every story. And to me, like as a film student and as like a theater person, learning how to write scripts and stuff, what legitimizes Star Wars is how much fucking money it makes and how popular it is. Like, oh my God, it's so ubiquitous. And then for Lucas to casually drop that it's about the Viet Cong, the light side versus the dark side, a simple way of looking at things. You could even say it's Manichaean way. A Manichaean way of looking at stuff. A little spoiler for the future. Manichaean is something that he says, Frantz Fanon, an Algerian philosopher and psychologist. He had a lot to say in this brilliant book, Wretched of the Earth. But we'll come back to it later. Sorry, I get too excited. And just establishing Star Wars, like, this is a big fucking deal. Everyone watches it. It doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, right? I'm a leftist, right? I'm talking about, anti-colonialism and stuff, anti-imperialism. But, of course, somebody on the right is like, what are you talking about, man? Don't be racist to white people, dude, okay? But we both love Star Wars. We both love when fucking R2-D2 uses the shock. Oh, we got him. Oh, that's great. When Luke lifts the ship out of the mud. Oh, that's just awesome.
No, I'm your father. No, that's impossible.
Nuh-uh. The fuck you mean, nah?
I don't think that structure, that monomyth structure, is what makes Star Wars interesting. I really think that political aspect, that's why Lucas talks about it so much. That feeling. What is that feeling? I would argue it's nationalism, a way of looking at things and a way of identifying with your nation. It is at its strongest during revolutions. Whether it be a communist revolution, whether it be a capitalist revolution, whether it be, overthrowing a monarchy, that feeling of nationalism is universal. And I think it's something that Star Wars really harvests. Like, I know, I feel that way. I watched Star Wars when I was a kid. The nostalgia I feel with it has a certain feeling to it. And, of course, this is totally subjective, right? But hopefully maybe someone can relate to this. I had a similar feeling of nostalgia as an American. When I was a kid, we say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in front of the flag, putting our hands on our hearts. And some kids would sit when they said God. Some kids wouldn't because we were in crazy Bay Area. We were in Oakland, man. We were in Orinda. It was crazy. Some people thought God was real. Some people didn't think it. Oh, wow. But that old school feeling of like American nationalism, like, man, America came really far to get to where it is today. A couple Super Bowls ago, watching Chris Stapleton sing the Pledge of Allegiance, Joe Rogan was like, that's a real way to sing the freaking Star Spangled Banner. I said Pledge of Allegiance, the Star Spangled Banner. Wow.
That got me, dude.
And I can't help but agree. I mean, I felt that way when I was watching it. But we shouldn't forget we're talking about the United States, right? I mean, I learned a lot about the United States, in this radicalization process that I've been going through. And they're bad, man. They're really bad. Fanon wrote extensively about it. And he writes about multiple regimes being overthrown and being turned, and feelings of nationalism. And I mentioned earlier Manichaeanism, which is good versus evil. When you're in that nationalism phase, when you're in that revolutionary phase, overthrowing a colonizer, overthrowing someone who's controlling you, everything is simple. They're governed by a simple doctrine, the colonized people. The nation must be made to exist. There is no program, no discourse, there are no resolutions, no factions. The problem is clear-cut. The foreigners must leave. Let us build a common front against the oppressor, and let us reinforce it with armed struggle. That feeling of simplicity, I think, is something that people really like. This Manichaeanism, it makes everything simple. Good versus evil. Star Wars is all about good versus evil. The light side versus the dark side. They make it so simple. They spell it out for you. But as we'll learn, revolution is not so simple. Especially if you want to get rid of this bourgeois class. That might be may or may not be ruining everything. All right, we're going to talk about Lenin a little bit. So he coined this term, imperialism, which is a popular term. If it were necessary to give the briefest possible definition of imperialism, we should have to say that imperialism is the monopoly stage of capitalism. Such a definition would include what is most important for, on the one hand, finance capital is the bank capital of a few very big monopolist banks, merged with the capital of monopolist associations of industrialists. And, on the other hand, the division of the world is a transition from a colonial policy, which has extended without hindrance to territories unseized by any capitalist power, to a colonial policy of monopolist possession of the territory of the world, which has been completely divided up. Lenin basically argues that imperialism, it's a step in capitalism itself, extending into a type of colonialism. A colonial policy of monopolist possession of the territory of the world. So, taking over territory of the world is a necessary step for the monopolist industrialists. You need more land, you need more stuff to build more capital, you need cheaper workers, you need to exploit all over the world, right? And we gotta say, I mean, the Imperial Army is the army in Star Wars that the rebels are fighting against. It was a term popularized during Vietnam. The Vietnam War for America was an imperial war. That's what a lot of kids protesting would talk about. And this is where I think a lot of liberals get tripped up. Like, he doesn't need to go and talk about the Communist Manifesto. He doesn't need to quote stuff in his fucking movie about it. But if you're gonna say it's a critique of capitalism, because we complain about capitalism all day and every piece of media and everything that we do, but we are attached to this idea that it's the best possible system and that there's nothing else that we can do about it. Capitalist realism. This is what I talked about in my last video. I think it can be simplified down to nothing does better on MTV than a protest against MTV. But I want to talk more about those revolutionary ideals. I think there is a distinction to be made, and I think we can go off from Star Wars and find an actual a good movie about anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism. And you might ask, are there any examples? Of course there is. I watched the Battle of Algiers before getting back into Wretched of the Earth, but there's this great video by Cinéma et Politique. There's going to be so much terrible French in this video, by the way, about the Battle of Algiers. And if you remember, throwback to last video, I had a quick little blip on the screen where I talked about my gestural anti-racial capitalist tier list. One thing I put in the base tier was Battle of Algiers. I will not lie to you, I had not watched the movie. I just put it in there because an LLM told me to. I looked into it after, okay? I looked into it after. I'm not a total fraud. And then I watched it. And it's on YouTube, full thing. And, oh man, fire. Holy shit, it's such a good movie. And it's based, directed by Gilles Pontecorvo. I'm going to call him Pontecorvo. And it was also co-produced by Casbah Films, which, okay, Battle of Algiers is about the Algerian Revolution, an early stage of the Algerian Revolution. It's about the struggle in the Kasbah, which is an area of Algiers, a somewhat apartheid colonial state. You got the Kasbah where the natives live, and you got where the colonists live, the French. Same sort of thing was going on in Vietnam. They were also being colonized by the French at around the same time. But yeah, it was about the experience of this dude, Ali Lapointe. Ali Lapointe.
Ali Lapointe, né le 15 janvier 1930 à Miliana.
Against the French occupying forces. Jean Martin is his name, who he played. Colonel Philippe Mathieu. Oh man, the French.
Mathieu Philippe, né le 5 août 1907 à Bordeaux. Grade lieutenant-colonel.
The other main character, it was based off of these writings by an actor in the cast, Sadi Youssef, Arab. Algerian. He wrote about his experiences during the Algerian Revolution. That was what the script that came to Gilles Pontecorvo and Franco Salinas. You should know about Pontecorvo. He's a communist, card-carrying communist, very anti-fascist, Jewish guy. He was there during Mussolini's reign in Italy. He's an Italian director. He saw a lot of parallels between the fascism and colonialism. They use a lot of similar strategies, especially wartime strategies, things like torture, things like a police state to control its people, to control the colonized natives. Sadi Youssef was actor in the film, heavily helped get it produced, and we're talking about a base means of production. I mean, literally the Algerian government came through, Kasbah Films came through and helps produce this movie, get it funded. It's about as base as you can get. And it's all about the Algerian Revolution, and what I really like about it, it is harrowingly real. Neo-realism. Italian neo-realism, very much popularized by Gilles Pontecorvo. Wretched of the Earth is like perfect thing to go along with it, because they were reading it constantly on set. They talked a ton about the ideas in the book, in the movie itself. But it follows the Front de Libération Nationale. But the FLN is what they're called. The regime that took control after the French left. The nationalist phase is nice and all. Everything's simple. I mean, parts of it aren't really nice. The blood and the fighting and the armed struggle that you have to endure to get through it isn't that fun. But that feeling of nationalism and that feeling of we are the strong, united Algerian people. That is something that comes through clearly in Battle of Algiers. Now, needless to say, this movie was fucking banned in France. Another fun piece of information about it is that the CIA screened it in like 2004 or something like that. Post 9/11, of course, talking about the terrorists and having to deal with the terrorists. That is when that term became really popular. It was in the 1960s. Talking about terrorists, Viet Cong are terrorists, the Algerians are terrorists, the FLN are terrorists. Using these guerrilla war tactics, kidnapping people, hijacking planes, things like that. And that's something that's still used today, obviously, in attacks of terror. I don't have the quote. I'm just not going to pull the quote. I'll just put it on screen. But like the quote, it's realistic. Like we don't give more strength to one side or the other, or look at one side more favorably than the other in this movie. We depict both acts equally. Like we see the acts of terrorism that the FLN commits. We see the horrid depravity of the colonial situation that France commits. We see both sides of the crime, and we see both sides of the colonial situation. Man, it fucking does it so well in that movie, I think. I mean, there's so much discourse, especially about Israel, about, this side did this side did that. We gotta look at and compare things. These terror groups commit certain types of terror, and we gotta look at both sides. Look at both sides. This side committed this, so it justifies us to do this. It justifies us to enter Iraq. It justifies us to enter Afghanistan because George Bush's dad got insulted or whatever, or 9/11 happened from Al Qaeda, who's an unassociated group. We just start dropping bombs in the Middle East just whenever we can, and searching desperately for the first thing that the first punch thrown. If you're America or if you're a colonial power, it's great. It would be like, hey, they fucked with us. They committed a terrorist attack. Time to, in the case of Israel, genocide a people, displace a people, commit war on a people, bomb people, drop napalm on people. This happened in Vietnam, the Vietnam that George Lucas is talking about, that everyone was protesting against, just looking for an excuse to jump into war. And Algiers depicts it great. Of course, we see the colonial regime and just the daily effects on people's lives. It cold opens on the end of the movie. and the police state that they have been brought into, and the tactics that they use. The CIA showed it to be like, look how much the police state are struggling with controlling terrorists. Look at the French had all these problems controlling terrorists. We're gonna have to look at that when we create a police state in Afghanistan or whatever, which is fucking crazy. But yeah, it's a great movie, and a lot of the ideas from Fanon show up. What Fanon's really famous for, and what a lot of people know about, and the edgy sort of controversial part, is his theory on violence. At the individual level, violence is a cleansing force. It rids the colonized of their inferiority complex, of their passive, despairing attitude. It emboldens them and restores their self-confidence. He talks about it as a psychological event for the colonized people, right? To take up violence, it's a muscular awareness, and you're ready to take the colonizer's place at any time. And once you take that leap into violence, and you take that leap, you gain confidence, and totally changes your perspective. No matter how bad your police state is, no matter how bad you're being beaten down by the police, or you're being beaten down in your colonized situation, that violence, that cleansing force, that cleansing praxis, is something that is necessary, according to Fanon, to break free and find some fucking freedom. A lot of controversy over this. A lot of controversy, needless to say. But that basic praxis, combination of practical action and theory, comes together in Battle of Algiers. These tactics of torture, these tactics of policing, having these checkpoints, sound familiar? Having these checkpoints and checking people and treating them like animals and dehumanizing people, is them doubling down and being like, okay, you come at me with violence, so we're gonna come at you. And according to Fanon, the spirit of the people, spirit of the masses, will always come through and will always win. And I should mention too that Fanon is a socialist. It is an important part of this. Fanon talks about revolutions in general. He talks about the American Revolution. He talks about the French Revolution. He talks about these nationalist feelings, that Manichaeanism that the colonizer enforces in the first place. To the colonizer, the colonized, the natives, are the paramount of evil at worst, and at best are sort of like these ignorant, dumb, we hear this rhetoric even now, immigrants are like these dumb people, they don't understand, they're so ignorant, these people who live in other countries, they live in dirt, squalor, they live in dirty, blah, 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 blah. The colonists, in a way, strike first. They build the Manichaean world, they build you in your colonized place, you in the Kasbah, you in Gaza, you in Vietnam, you in North Vietnam. They build these us and them dichotomies, this Manichaeanism. But in the colonizer situation, it's very simple, a similar simplicity. And they're put onto the colonized people, and this is the natives. And the natives, according to Fanon, are just copying what the colonizer has given to them. Speaking the language of violence, speaking the language of Manichaeanism. And when you realize it's us versus them, it's good versus evil, colonized versus colonizer, everything is simple, right? What did I say earlier? They discovered that the rural masses have never ceased to pose the problem of their liberation in terms of violence, of taking back the land from the foreigners, in terms of natural struggle and armed revolt. Everything is simple, right? They're governed by a simple doctrine. The nation must be made to exist. But it's not so easy. And I bring up his socialism because socialism is not easy. The choice of a socialist regime, of a regime entirely devoted to the people, based on the principle that man is the most precious asset, will allow us to progress faster in greater harmony, consequently ruling out the possibility of a caricature of society, where a privileged few hold the reins of political power and economic power without a thought for the nation as a whole.
علي ماهوش الإرهاب اللي وصلنا باش نربح الحرب وإلا باش تنجح الثورة. الإرهاب لازم في الابتداء، ولكن من بعد لابد الشعب كله يتحرك. هذا هو الهدف تاعنا بهذا الإضراب الكبير. يلزم تجنيد كل الجزائريين. فهمت علي؟
Returning to the masses is a big theme that leaders of national struggle return to. People like Ho Chi Minh, people like Mao Zedong. Sorry, not to bring up some controversial Asians. Che Guevara, people like Castro. This touch with the people, it's an important part for Fanon to build a fairer, more socialist society. And of course, I'm talking in extremes, right? I'm American. I'm a upper middle class, whatever, American. And what the fuck do I know about any of this difficulty and this struggle? It seems so far placed from where I am. That's what a fucking liberal would say. I mean, it's true, right? We hear this discourse all the time, right? Like, oh, you're so privileged. How could you talk about something so intense as a communist revolution? Oh, you don't appreciate what you got? I think this is where we bring Star Wars back in. You fell into my trap. So Star Wars is liberal, fucking obviously. So Lucas comes from this classic liberal tradition, made in the 60s during Vietnam. They're called fucking hippies, bro. They're called hippies. Oftentimes upper middle class kids like me, hey, going to San Francisco, you know, taking drugs and stuff. Oh, whoa, peace and love, man. Studying Buddhism, touching grass and stuff, and eating grass, and being against Vietnam. No one liked Vietnam. Another video I used for this was Mr. Beat's video on Vietnam. He's a great American historian. I can't take that from him. For me, it's like subject. Different subject. What's great about Battle of Algiers is we switch subjects. Like in film, we follow a certain subject. We see the horrors committed by the French colonial regime. We see the terrorist attacks done by the FLN. You know, we see Colonel Philippe Mathieu. He's glorified. A lot of people complain about that. He's a glorified French colonist. Apocalypse Now, which is a movie worth bringing up. Of course, I'm bringing back my smoke with Coppola. It was slated to be directed by George Lucas in the first place, based off Hearts of Darkness. It just takes such an American perspective, bro. Like, oh man, we don't even see a Vietnamese person because they're in the trees, man. Oh shit, that's how it felt to be an American at the time.
Beautiful day out here in the jungle. Nothing can go wrong on such a beautiful day. What was that? They're in the trees!
They're in the trees, man! They're in the fucking holes. They're hiding in holes. There was not one shot of a fucking Vietnamese person do deer hunter. They're like, put the gun in him, put the gun. Robert De Niro, take that gun to the head. No, I'm gonna throw it. I'm gonna take the gun to the head. Oh, what a tough white guy. But he's in an unjust situation. No, I'm not Vietnamese. But where's, you know, East Asian? Give me some Ho Chi Minh. Give me some glorious leader, man. Like Ho Chi Minh running up the fucking Baker, running up the fucking running from country to country, fighting in little holes. We don't get shots of Vietnamese guys, you know, stabbing fucking white guys in the face. That'd be sick. Obviously, you know, it wasn't nice what they were doing to Americans. But if we apply the same like glory that we apply to our American characters to the Vietnamese, it's totally different. It's very radical. And part of why I think the Battle of Algiers is like this movie that is based, and it's all good, and Americans can watch it and won a Palme d'Or or whatever, is because it's not about America. It's about the French. Of course, we all love shitting on the French. Imagine a Battle of Algiers, but Battle of Gaza, Battle of West Bank, you know, shots of Hamas, you know, committing terrorist attacks, shots of the Israeli occupying forces committing horrible acts, going through the full process of policing, you know, all this crap we've seen on the internet of this rigorous, realistic depiction. And obviously the horrors of the colonialism outweigh the terrorist attacks from groups like Hamas. Like if somebody got that made magically, I mean, could you imagine the fallout? Could you imagine it? They're not even playing no other fucking land. Like, shout out fucking Hamdan Bilal, a man who escaped with his life after being fucking lynched by the goddamn IDF, by fucking settler militia, Israeli militia, random fucking people slashing his tires, stealing him out of a car. Like, give me a fucking break. Dude got an Oscar last week. I was there. I saw it. Everyone was like, oh, I'm gonna find this Gazan, get a fucking Oscar. Adrian Brody, we all gotta love each other, guys. Guys, we all gotta love each other. That's what it's all about. Like, shut the fuck up, motherfucker. This is why I don't like liberalism. Okay, took a breather. And yeah, I said I was there at the Oscars. I freaking worked there as a freaking waiter. Just for me, it's like, how much does an Oscar really mean? How much is this, the liberal establishment, the democratic establishment of Hollywood, and how much does that really mean if you're gonna get beat and lynched the second you get back to Palestine? Let's move on to more fun stuff. George Lucas, I would say, is like, you know, good old classical liberal, probably doesn't like Trump. He talked a lot about his opinions on Nixon as well, and his move towards dictatorship, and that was another thing he talked about in Star Wars. Star Wars is kind of about, you know, the Empire is a dictatorship, there's no democracy, fascist-ish empire that we have going on. And Nixon did the same thing. We didn't pass Congress to drop troops into Vietnam. I think that comes back to like the point of like he's taking the subject, the eye of the camera off of the Vietnamese or off people who aren't American for his American myth, his American mythology that is Star Wars. And he's putting it onto, white people or American looking people, for lack of a better word. And also Lucas talks about being, canceled for his lack of diversity in Star Wars, for the old Star Wars, as he's like, but we got Wookiees and other stuff.
They would say, well, it's all white men. Most of the people there are aliens. And the idea is that you're supposed to accept people for what they are, even if they're big and furry, or whether they've got they're green and whatever.
But besides that, like I said, the burden of proof is on me, right? Like we have to look at how it adopts these revolutionary ideals. And it's kind of fun. When I was reading Wretched of the Earth, he talks about the different sort of characters in the revolution and how useful they are, and their sort of roles in the pre-revolutionary phase, the national phase, as he calls it. And I think every character from Star Wars represents one of these revolutionary factions. I want to focus on 4. We're going to stick to these characters. We're going to stick with Luke, Leia, Han Solo, and then the Ewoks as well. First, we'll start with Luke. So Luke is like kind of the quintessential leader. He came from peasant background. He came from, the moisture farms, working as in the fields as a native laborer. Obviously, didn't have his parents and like all this stuff. And was destined to be a Jedi and was chosen by Ben Kenobi, and is the son of Anakin Skywalker. He casts off his animal status, so to speak, his peasant status by joining a revolution and dedicating himself to it. The line of action involves the senior or junior cadres whose activities have been object of colonialist police persecution. It is worth noting that these men attained the leadership of the party through sheer hard work, self-sacrifice, and exemplary patriotism. These men from the rank and file are often laborers, seasonal workers, and sometimes even genuinely unemployed. For them, being activists in a national party is not a question of politics, but the only way of casting off their animal status. Yeah, so to say, Luke is in like horrible conditions, lives on Tatooine through revolution and through being a leader in the revolution to cast off this animal status. And this sort of arc kind of happens with a lot of the characters in Star Wars. So next we got Mr. Han Solo. Fanon talks about the lumpen proletariat, which is a term, Marxist term, literally means like idiot proletariat. And these are like the unemployed, sort of criminal vagabond type people. The pimps, the hooligans, the unemployed, and the petty criminals. When approached, give the liberation struggle all they have got, devoting themselves to the cause like valiant workers. So, it's like these people who are sort of cast to the outside of society, people who live on the outskirts of cities, like Han Solo does. Solo, he has like his reservations about the whole thing, reservations about being part of the revolution or being part of this whatever good versus evil battle. He's like, I got trouble being a part of that.
You don't believe in the Force, do you?
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything.
These revolutionary characters show up again and again throughout history. Ho Chi Minh, talking about Vietnam being a waged worker, seasonal worker, worked as a baker for a long time, worked in a working class setting, and dedicated himself to the revolution. Next up is Leia. Fanon also describes a moderate political faction, right? And that's Leia before she is radicalized, once she sees her planet, go boom. She has a similar prison phase as described by Frantz Fanon, where, a revolutionary will go to prison. But it's a very common experience no matter what revolutionary party you're in, be it socialist, be it, capitalist, be it a fascist. But she, is sort of radicalized by her time in prison, which is how A New Hope starts. And then I wanted to bring it last to the Ewoks. Fanon talks a lot about the masses in this book, and the peasant masses and the natives. Ewoks are like very directly mapped onto that, and they're obviously very suggestive of the Viet Cong. They live in the jungle, they live in the forest, they have spears, they use like these, guerrilla tactics and makeshift weapons to defeat the Imperial army. They see it as this brute force, this sort of inert group of people that's hard to control, but the leader has to return to the masses. Fanon talks about a lot, returning to the masses, and it awakens in the leader what has to be done for the revolution to happen, and that happens in Star Wars. Luke literally goes to the Ewoks. He also lives in places like Dagobah and like these sort of backwater places with the people of the galaxy, and he communes with them and talks with them and becomes more enlightened from it. So Fanonian, almost the exact script that Fanon follows. Lucas knew sort of inherently, and through studying and understanding a little bit about Vietnam, that these are the characters in a revolution, and these are stories that kind of keep on coming back. And these are stories that he appropriates and puts into his own characters and turn into a story that can make, billions of dollars. Because, we all know these characters. We know the bad, tough guy. We know the guy chosen by God. We know the peasants, rising and becoming a revolutionary. We've heard of all these people in history. Maybe that is closer to his mono-myth, to this American myth. A revolution is a compelling story to people, even if you're American and actively participate in the colonization of somewhere. If you're an American who's subject to the American propaganda about the global South, about South America, about the Third World, about all this stuff, about China, about Russia, we hear all these horror stories about these revolutions in these countries. But it's hard to say, it's kind of inspiring. The people rose up and chose something over the status quo, the controlling party, especially in a case against colonialism.
Doute que la surprenante unanimité de ces démonstrations a influencé de larges couches de l'opinion publique française. Selon des nouvelles de Paris, la partie la plus sensible des milieux politiques serait orientée vers la recherche de nouveaux rapports avec l'Algérie.
This nationalistic feeling can be put into movies and compels people. But like other goofy shit about Star Wars, like the reason why it's so liberal, like Lucas focusing on Nixon and like focusing on him becoming a dictator, or these distinct moves towards fascism in America that, is so concerning to people and so concerning to the liberals, and not doing anything substantive about it, or making this sort of non-statement that the empire could be like America if we let Nixon do something like go into Vietnam again or do these stupid wars. Iraq people were very in support of that war at that time. Like, it's not completely a choice of a dictatorship. And that is less to say, I think there's just too much of a focus on democracy. I mean, they can't shut up about democracy in all the Star Wars movies, especially in the prequels. Like, oh my God. Oh, Anakin, for democracy, or whatever he says.
Don't make me kill you. Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.
This is how democracy dies. To applause. To thousands of applause. And like, I was looking into Star Wars and like how the political parties work. It was describing the Galactic Senate, like from episodes 1, 2, and 3, as fucking legislative, judicial, and fucking executive branches. Like, oh my God, like why the fuck would they use America's way of democracy like it works so fucking well? Like, what are you talking about? I think that's a travesty in a sci-fi movie to not use a political party that's more creative than America's. Like, it just falls into the classic trap, like into this classic End of Democracy Fukuyama trap. To be fair, I haven't actually read End of Democracy by Fukuyama. I'll give it a shot at some point. Maybe I'll do a video about it. But from what I hear and my understanding, that neoliberal capitalism is like the ultimate form of governance, and like the best way that we can run shit is obviously, I think that's so silly, especially in your movie, like with people that can travel at light speed, people who can move things with their mind. Like, the best fucking thing they can come up with is a legislative, executive, fucking a judicial branch. The Jedi kids watch I'm a Bill, the I'm a Bill video.
Just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well,
Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?
It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be along.
I think it connects to the liberalism of the hippies and the hippie movement. Like, I think hippies were more angry about the draft than about the war in Vietnam being necessarily unjust. That's sort of what Mr. Beat talks about. And he talks about how it's like super heterogeneous, and like the movement, that leftist movement, is like all over the place and they can't choose like the best way to do stuff, which is a classic leftist movement. I mean, the same thing happened in '08 with the Occupy movement. These things that gain a lot of political traction are mired down by a lack of clarity about the ideas. And it's sort of this disconnect between moving further left or, sticking with your sort of liberalism. The concern about Nixon is what Lucas pulled from Star Wars, or thinks that is like the most important message of Star Wars. He can't shut up about the democracy stuff. That doesn't do service to his initial proposal, which is that it's like Vietnam. It's like the Viet Congs, because the Viet Congs are communists. It's a socialist state. It's a socialist revolution. So you can't have everything. Like, you got to choose one or the other. And I really think he just chose liberalism and appropriated those like 1960s ideals in new socialist countries. To say that Lucas is the only guy who talks about Star Wars, I'm sure everyone will bring up exceptions and things that are maybe a little bit more based, like stuff in the Clone Wars about native people, or Andor. That's actually where I got this video idea from. Like, the Andor guy talked about Battle of Algiers and like how they filmed it similarly to Battle of Algiers, or the Rogue One director filmed it similarly and took a lot of inspiration from Battle of Algiers, totally taking out the original idea of that work, then the point of Battle of Algiers, which was to make people understand the mindset of a people going through revolution. Not glamorize it, not make it to this great game of good versus evil, but to show realistically what a people has to go through to remove a colonizing force, to replace the colonial force. There's a lot more in Wretched of the Earth besides just his stuff on violence and the colonized people standing up for himself. The majority of the book goes over developing a national culture and the problems of building a new nation, especially in the purview of socialism, because it's about building consciousness in people and reconnecting with the masses and making sure that the old tribalisms, he talks specifically about Africa, Algeria, about the old tribal issues and clearing way for that and dealing with new stuff when you're becoming a new nation in the in the 20th century or the 21st century even now. I think that's what's so great about Wretched of the Earth and so spectacular about this book, and why I think people really liked Fanon. These characters are so universal. These experiences of revolution are so universal. They apply to the American Revolution. They apply to Ukraine now. They apply to Gaza now. They apply to the Viet Cong back then, They apply to almost every place. And the universality of what he said is what made the book such a strong work of colonial theory and really just gave us that fucking base. But like anything else in our lovely capitalist system, it can be appropriated. And if you make a movie about it, you could make a lot of fucking money. Like Mark Fisher says, nothing does better on MTV than a protest against MTV, right? The question maybe shouldn't be, is Luke Skywalker a terrorist? Because he is. He's just a white, cool terrorist who's the main character in the movie, so we think he's awesome. But I think a better question for Luke is, when he takes power, which he, I guess, doesn't later, but if he does and becomes the new Galactic Republic or whatever, will he embody the will of the people, or will he prolong the heritage of the colonial economy, thinking, and institutions? That might be a more interesting question. But I guess we don't get that question answered with these new fucking movies. Like, maybe that's why Mark Hamill got so mad when he saw those new Star Wars movies and where they took Luke, where they took his character. Maybe Mark Hamill's Zionist ass would have liked a national home for the Jedi. Oh boy, I don't think Disney would have went with that script. Sorry, Mark, we're gonna have to turn that one down. But yeah, man, that's why it's so difficult to make something truly revolutionary or truly based in our media, because the rules of the game, Star Wars, the most popular sci-fi series, the monomyth, Joseph Campbell's structure that everyone uses for their scripts, seems like it's not really built for it. It has a heritage of upholding and prolonging that heritage of the colonial economy, thinking, and institutions. At least that's what I think. And that's not to say I don't hate Star Wars. It's a fun movie. I don't hate Apocalypse Now. They're all fun movies. Don't get too mad. And hey, if you're a liberal, you're not an idiot. Well, but you're better than a Republican, I'll give you that. That's definitely true. Yeah, that's pretty much the video. So those are my thoughts. And hey, watch Battle of Algiers, man, on YouTube. It's free. And I'm not going to do the Jordan Peterson outro anymore, I think. Or maybe I will. Don't listen to Jordan Peterson.
Constantly. How many people are dying for lack of an encouraging word?